First one's number 75. Title is Secants, Tangents, and Angle Measures. Secants, tangents, and angle measures. If a secant and a tangent intersect at the point of tangency, if a secant and a tangent intersect at the point of tangency. I'll tell you what happens in a second. I know you're dying to know what happens. But here's a circle. Remember, a secant hits the circle twice, and then a tangent hits the circle once. So here's the tangent line. And then we need a secant line that intersects the tangent line right there at the point of tangency. So here's the secant line. So we got a secant line and a tangent line intersecting at the point of tangency. That's the situation. If a secant and a tangent intersect at the point of tangency, then what happens is then the angle formed is half the measure of the intercepted arc. Then the angle formed is half the measure of the intercepted arc. So let's come over here and let's just temporarily pretend that this is 80 degrees. So that's 80. So the intercepted arc, that's the arc there, is 80. So then how big is this angle? Yeah, Manny? 40, because it's half the intercepted arc. That's what this says. The angle formed is half the measure of the intercepted arc. So if that's 80, then this right here is 40. Okay, then we can figure out more in this picture. How many degrees is it all the way around? 360 all the way around, right? So this is 80. So how could I figure out this? Just take 360 minus 80, right? It's 360 all the way around. This part's 80. So if I take the 360 minus that 80, that gives me 280. So this would be 280. And then that would make this 140, because it's half of the 280. Or another way we could figure out that this was 140 is this is a linear pair. It's a half rotation. So you could do 180 minus 40. Anyway, that's 140 for sure, either way. The old way to do it is this is a half rotation. So 40 and 140 have to add up to 180. That's a linear pair. The new way to do it is half of the 280 is 140. Okay, next one says if two secants intersect inside a circle. If two secants intersect inside a circle. So obviously we have a circle. We're going to draw two secant lines, and they need to intersect inside the circle. So here's one secant line. It's called a secant line because it's hitting the circle twice. And then here's another circle, or another secant line. And those two secant lines are intersecting inside the circle. So what happens is, then the measures of the angles formed let me make that singular. Then the measure of the angles formed is half the sum of the measures of the intercepted arcs. Then the measure of the angles formed is half the sum of the measures of the intercepted arcs. So let's say this arc is 30 and this arc is 50. So this word sum, what does that mean? Yeah. Yeah, it's just another way of saying add them up, right? When it says the sum of the measures, you just add up the measures. So that means we're going to take 30 plus 50, which is 80. And then what do you do with the sum? It's half the sum. So this adds up to 80. Half of that's 40. So that means these are going to be 40 each. They have to be equal, right? Because they're vertical from each other. That's old stuff. These are equal to each other because they're across from each other. They're called vertical. That's why they're both 40. All right, now 76. So title here is Secants, Tangents, Angle Measures, Part 2. If you want to write it all out, it's just the same as the other Descartes, secants, tangents, and angle measures. But I think you get the idea. So if two secants a secant and a tangent or two tangents intersect outside a circle. If two secant, a secant and a tangent, or two tangents, intersect outside the circle. So this is 3 different pictures. they're pretty much the same. So we need 3 circles. So in the first picture, we need 2 secants intersecting outside the circle. So secant line, because it hits the circle twice. Another secant line, hits the circle twice. So there we have 2 secants intersecting outside the circle. And then the middle picture is supposed to be a secant and a tangent intersecting outside the circle. So here's a tangent line, because it just hits the circle once. Here's a secant line, hits the circle twice. So we've got a tangent line and a secant line intersecting outside the circle. And then last but not least, we need 2 tangents intersecting outside the circle. See if I can pull this off. I'm bad at drawing tangent lines. I always miss the circle. That wasn't too bad. So there's 2 tangent lines intersecting outside the circle. So I just want to remind you about yesterday. Yesterday we were talking about the lengths. Like we measured from here to here, and we got 10 inches. Over here we were measuring from here to here, and maybe we got 12 inches. So yesterday was about lengths. Same pictures, just measuring the length of it. Now today we're talking about the angle, so we're shooting for what those angles are rather than what the lengths are. All right, so it turns out that then the measure of the angles formed is 1/2 the difference of the intercepted arcs. Then the measure of the angles formed is 1/2 the difference of the intercepted arcs. So what does difference mean? That's subtract. So over here we were adding, and because the intersection point was inside the circle. But here the intersection points are outside the circle, so that's why we're going to subtract. So let me mix some numbers up here. Let's say this is 100, and this is 40. So then what you do is you take 100 minus 40, and that's 60. And then you do half of that. So that means this angle is 30, this angle is 30. So then over here, let's say this was 120, and this was 30. So you would take 120 minus 30, which is 90, and then divide by 2, that's 45. So that's 45, that's 45. And then here, let's say this is 110. On this picture, that's all you need. You just need to know that that's 110. Because it's 360 all the way around, right? So if that's 110, then this is 250. Because 250 and 110 is 360. And then you do 250 minus 110, which is 140. And then divide by 2. That makes both of those 70. The key here is, here in these pictures, the intersection point is outside the circle. So that's why we subtracted. And then here, the intersection point is inside the circle. So that's why we added. All right, that's it for no cards. Thank you for listening. I have a joke. So a man hurried into a library, and he rushed up to the front desk, and he said, "Do you have any books on paranoia?" And the librarian said, "They're right behind you." So I know it's not funny. Anytime you have to explain a joke, it's really not funny. But the idea is, the person's paranoid, and then the books are right behind him. So it's just going to add to the paranoia, right? So the books are right behind you. Yeah, I know. It's not funny. It's not funny. Sorry about that. All right, title of the paper is Secants, Tangents, and Angle Measures. Seems like a recurring theme here. So on this worksheet, the problems are lettered instead of numbered. So the first one's A. So A is this angle here. So how many degrees is A? It's just half the 160, right? So it's 80. So then what's B? Yeah, Maddie? 100, because it's just half the 200. Okay, here's the next picture. C and D. And E and F. So let's go for C and D first. C and D are across from each other. They're called vertical, so they're going to be the same. So, and C and D have to do with the 40 and the 120. Should I add them or subtract them? Add them, because the intersection point is inside the circle. When the intersection point's inside the circle, that's when you add. So we're going to do 40 plus 120, that's 160. And then divide by 2, that's 80. So C and D are both 80. So then, once you know that C is 80, AD and E make a linear pair. This is old stuff. Even if the circle wasn't there, we would know that this was 180, because it's a half rotation. So then that's 100. So E and F are 100. Or you could use the new information and do 140 plus 60, which is 200, and then divide by 2 and get 100 that way also. 140 plus 60 is 200, divided by 2 is 100. So at any rate, E is 100, two different ways, and F is 100 because it's vertical with E. Everybody doing okay? All right, next one's G. So what do we do here? Should we add or should we subtract? Subtract because the intersection point is outside the circle. So in this one we added because the intersection point was inside the circle. Here we're going to subtract. So you take 80 minus 20, that's 60, and then you divide by 2. So G is 30. So there's a person working at a lake, and he's renting boats. And there's a bunch of boats out on the lake. And he looks out and sees a boat. So he gets on the loudspeaker and he says, "Boat 99, please come in." There's no response. Nothing happens. So he gets back on the loudspeaker and says, "Boat 99, come in." And then nothing happens. So someone he's working with points out that they only have 75 boats. They don't have, so there's not a boat 99. So then he gets back on the loudspeaker and says, "Boat 66, are you okay?" Because apparently boat 66 has turned over. He thought it was boat 99. But they're in trouble.